Welcome back to Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project, episode 268. My name is David Reed. I really appreciate you joining us on the weekend here and taking some time out of your world to spend it with us exploring Stargate. Alan McCullough, writer and producer, Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, Universe. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, David. Great. I'm very happy to do this. This is a bit of an honor.
Well,
a bit of a throwback and a bit of an honor for me.
I'm thrilled to have you, and I must apologize for taking this long to get you on. I sent a message to you through Twitter a while ago, and it was like, I don't know why I didn't just contact his agent directly. I have IMDb Pro. Let's actually go through the front door and knock. So
fair enough. You know, I belatedly did find the Twitter
Oh,
message
you did?
after. I was like, oh, well, you can see how proficient I am with social media.
So I don't blame you for at all. So how are you? Where? So you are in Toronto.
Yes.
And what are you up to these days? And what's going on in your world?
Well, I'm writing and trying and pitching new shows. I've been in Toronto now since 2009. I think my wife and I came back from Vancouver 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I worked another sci-fi show briefly called Lost Girl, and then I kind of managed to wedge my way into the cop procedural genre, and I did a couple of Canadian shows, one called Cracked, and then I guess I did Rookie Blue as well for a season. In between that, I briefly went to the States and did a show called Rain, one season of a show called Rain, which was a very bizarre show, just kind of procedural, but also very
bizarre. Come on.
It was a fun show. It was definitely a fun show. But and then I did a show called Private Eyes, which is another procedural. And then most recently, I actually created a show called The Spencer Sisters, which was airing on the CW, starring Leah Thompson, which was a blast, but it didn't get renewed.
So, Leah Thompson's great. That is such a shame
fantastic
to hear.
Yeah. She and Stacey Farber played this mother-daughter duo. Stacey Farber, you may know her from Degrassi, the second time around, The Next Generation, and I don't know, the 14th, 15th Degrassi. Anyway, and she was also on Wind River. Windy River. Anyway, the two of them were great together, and it's. I thought we did a fantastic job. I thought they did a fantastic job. But, what are you going to do?
One of my favorite films of all time, it's probably top 6 or 7, is The Time Traveler's Wife.
Oh, yes.
And she is just extraordinary in that. And I just finished talking with Tom Astle, who wrote Core I for SG-1, and I just made the comment that some of the best science fiction has very little sciencey stuff in it.
Right.
And if you haven't read the book, it's Time Travel. It's a great book, and it's just, here is the bizarre situation, and the rest is to wind up your characters and let them go dealing with that situation, and that is great sci-fi.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Brad Wright was always a fan of that too. Putting two people in a situation and having them talk their way through it, and whether it was in the midst of solving a scientific problem, but also dealing with something personal. Those were obviously the best episodes of Stargate, and the ones that really dealt with the personal stuff as well. I grew to really love. At the beginning of my career, I was much more of a plot guy and much less of a character guy, and I would say I've had to sort of develop that aspect of my writing over the years, because it's become much more a part of every episode, every TV show now. The character really started to. People are less willing, I think, to accept a show that's just plot. Everything started to develop. Even the hardcore procedurals like Law and Order and Law and Order SVU really started to delve into the characters themselves because people's appetites had changed, I think.
Mm-hmm. Very much of that. I can definitely. Tell me about your world before Stargate. Where were you geographically? What were you wanting to do with your life and whatever career you were pursuing, and how you fell into this absolute beast of a franchise?
It's a good story. I guess it's a good story. It's a very I don't know if it's a unique story, but it's an embarrassing story. For a while I grew up in Alberta, in central Alberta. which is in the prairie provinces in Canada. And, my exposure to the film industry was really only watching it on TV or in movies. There wasn't really a film industry to speak of in Alberta when I was growing up. It did start to pick. They shot Legends of the Fall there. They shot, way back. They started shooting some things. Unforgiven when I was in college. They shot Unforgiven there. So, my gateway into it was through acting. I thought, okay, well, I admire the entertainment industry. So, and the only job that I really know that exists in the entertainment industry is being an actor. So I trained as an actor. I spent far too long training as an actor.
I can see that. I can see that. You've got the chin.
I don't know. It's funny because I don't think it was ever a good fit for me. I just did it because I admired the industry, and it was only once I did 2 years at a community college in Alberta, and then 4 years at a degree granting college in New York State, and then I got out and I spent a year in New York, kind of going on auditions, and I came back to Toronto and did another couple years just auditioning in Toronto, and I don't think there's really nothing good on my resume, and I don't think I ever really was that good. But it was only then that I started to appreciate that there were other things you could do in the industry, and so I took some weekend courses on everything: producing, directing, editing, writing for film and writing for TV. And having done the writing for TV workshop, I knew that was where I wanted to focus my attention. So I did. I enrolled in. I applied for and got into the probably the best training center in Canada. It's called the Canadian Film Centre here in Toronto. Norman Jewison established it in 1969 or something like that. Bought a giant plot of land in sort of north central Toronto, and that's where I went to be trained by. They basically build a mock writing room where you work as a writer for showrunners creating a show that they've brought in, and they try to mimic what it's like to be in a real writing room as closely as possible. Wow. And so out of the film center, I got my agent, and then I got my first job, and and Stargate was actually my second job as a writer. So, yeah.
Well, good for you. What was it like? How aware were you how aware were you of Stargate before applying for that?
No, not much. It was a tough first go, actually, because my agent Glenn is actually best friends with Rob Cooper. They go back years and years and years. Okay. So it happened at the time when, after they had done the 8th season of Stargate SG-1, and everybody assumed that was going to end it on the fishing pond, and everybody assumed, oh, what a beautiful way to end the series.
That's how I thought it would end. I always thought they would end with them going fishing. Boy, was I wrong. Kind of wrong.
Well, apparently what happened is that was always the plan. They were going to end SG-1 and just focus on Atlantis. Yeah. And then the Sci-Fi Network called up and said, hey, why don't we do another season of Stargate? But they called up so late that, Rob and Brad and everybody else thought they better beef up the staff. So I got an opportunity to pitch on Stargate in like September or October of whatever year that was, 2004 maybe.
So
or
5,
early
1, 2, 6, 2, 7, 3, 8, 4. Season 8, yeah.
Season 8, yeah. So they were developing season 9 in the fall of fall and spring, fall of 2004, spring of 2005. Yeah. So I developed some pitches, but again, I wasn't that familiar with the Stargate enterprise. I pitched 3 ideas. I mean, one was a good idea, but it was sort of too similar to something they'd already done. The other was a complete embarrassment because it showed a complete lack of understanding of. It had something to do with they find a Stargate underneath the Bermuda Triangle, and it made no sense. It was like the canon wouldn't have allowed for that one.
Yeah.
And then the third one was the show that eventually became, I think, Prototype was my first episode, and I had pitched that somewhere along the way there was a planet where they had set up a Stargate that was inaccessible unless you knew the secret code, basically a call forwarding device on the Stargate. And that call forwarding device idea is what they bought. they and you know and that was the difference maker to get on the show. And so I got hired. They flew me out. It was a great experience. They flew me out there a week to sit in the room and break it with everybody. And then we broke the episode. And then I flew back and I wrote the outline, and then I wrote the first draft. And I don't think they were that happy with the initial outline and first draft. But thankfully, Rob got on the phone with me and kind of walked me through what he thought was wrong with it and what I could do better.
Here, kid, this is how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. I mean, that was sort of the sliding doors moment right there, because they could just have easily have said, "Hey, listen, thanks so much, we're going to take this over," and that would have been it. I wouldn't have been part of Stargate. But Rob, to his credit, got on the phone with me and spent about an hour, and not even the whole thing, just went through kind of the first act and says, "Okay, here's," and going through the first act of the script took about an hour. And then it was like, now you get the idea. And I think it was kind of a test. It was like, do I get the idea, or am I just going to do his act one notes and then, but I took it apart, redid it. And the second draft landed much more, they were much happier with it. So they gave me an 8-week contract and then extended it to a full season contract. And then from then I was in the door and, off and running with everybody else. But yeah.
It is quite an extraordinary opportunity, and to be able to get in and pitch at that point. I mean, you're talking about the 9th season of a show. I remember talking to I don't remember who it was, like Christopher Judge or something. He's like, we're in bonus land at this point.
Serious overtime.
We're here because the fans love it. Otherwise we would have been done a long time ago. Did you expect to I guess you probably didn't expect to be a part of this thing for another, 6 years, 5 years of programming.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. I mean, nobody knew if 9 was. I guess once they renewed 9, everybody assumed there would be a season 10 for Stargate. And I was hired on Stargate SG-1. I did also consult on Atlantis simultaneously, and then when SG-1 ended, I shifted over and was a full time on Atlantis. I mean, it's basically it's just a title change. It wasn't like
there's no moving offices.
Yeah.
It's the same building.
Exactly. But it was an experience. I think I was sort of saved by the fact that because season 9, they'd made the decision, having ended up having tied up season 8 so neatly, they didn't want to go back into Anubis and all that. They wanted to create a brand new mythology. They didn't want to resurrect the Goa'uld mythology. They wanted to go a new direction with the Ori. So when I was coming in season 9, yes, I had missed out on the first 8 seasons of lore, but the main, I could very quickly get up to speed on what the new lore was, the new story with the Ori, and once I landed, I did actually. They all said, "Oh, you don't have to bother going and learning and watching all the rest of the episodes." But of course I did. I watched from episode 1 through episode 8. I found a way to watch them at 1.5 speed or something on my laptop.
Season 1 to season 8. Okay.
Yes, season 1 to season 8.
Wow, you mowed them down.
I absolutely did, yeah.
Oh, geez. And it's interesting because your first episode is a Goa'uld story, even though there's technically no Goa'uld in it.
Correct.
Because I love that with season 9, they didn't cut off their previous enemies. They allowed them to evolve based on the battle that had occurred at the end of season 8. And for Anubis in particular, Anubis was dead, but he had still left things sitting around. And a lot of the Goa'uld were just in hiding. Any of them who had managed to survive this slaughter. Balls on Earth at this point, they found a new place for them in the world. You guys found a new place for them in the world that you had created with bringing the Ori in as well. So it was something for the past fans who, had watched the first 8 seasons, as well as anyone who might have come along just for, when Cameron enters, at the beginning of that. It worked.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that was, well, not only wise, I think it helped the show because to some degree the Ori were a little stuffy. I mean, there was no, the priors. Well, you can't you can't have a conversation with them. You don't know why they're doing it. It's mindless kind of, resistance is futile type of
Very similar.
mentality. So yeah, so it was good to have, like, Cliff Simon as Ball, rest his soul, is it was just, I mean, what a fantastic guy to work with. I loved, in the later episodes, I loved writing for Ball, and I think the pitch, I don't know if it ended up that way, but the original pitch for Prototype was that it was Anubis's son that was stuck in the cave, or on that planet.
Daniel says he's essentially the son of Anubis,
right? Yeah,
possessing his memories.
Right.
Yeah.
That was you remember it better than I do.
That's all good. No, I loved the idea of because if any of the Gold were trying to transcend their form, there was an episode in season 7 called Resurrection, I believe, written and directed by Michael, if I'm not mistaken, and that was another example of a Gould trying to transcend their symbiote form into integrating into something else, and Anubis actually pulled it off. He was actually stabilized, and I loved that idea. Neil Jackson, we're having him on later this week.
Oh, great. That's great.
And he mops up the floor with that role. This is an episode where if you don't get the right actor, you are hooped.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was all him, and he's got those big monologues. Like, I mean, it was he absolutely rocked that episode. And I at that point, in later years, I began to produce more and be involved in casting and things like that. But at that point, it was my first episode. I was just like, just don't kick me out of the building. And
were you in the casting room?
No, I didn't. I had no part of it in it whatsoever. But Rob came in and said, "Oh, we've cast this guy," and yeah, it was unbelievable. He just really, really owned that role.
He has gravitas. Neil, I'm going to toot his horn for a minute here, because you got this episode where he has all of this personality and rhythm and everything else, and then you juxtapose that to the punk wraith in Vegas, and he's unrecognizable.
Right.
But the episode still hangs on him.
Yeah.
Whether he's jumping off of buildings and it's not getting filmed, or at the card table with Shepard, he pulls no punches.
I think that was Rob probably. I'm sure that was an intent. Rob was like, loved him so much based on Prototype, but like wanted to use him again and reached out to him and brought him in specifically. We may not have even cast the role. Like we just may have gone out to him as an offer.
Wow. Was your I'm asking a lot from you here in terms of pulling you back in time. Do you remember Woolsey being in the first draft? Was that your idea, or was he added later?
Because
there was a concerted effort to get Bob in the show.
Yeah.
Because everyone loved him. He was really close with Joe Malazzi, and there was he was just magic. He was just magic, and he brought the Star Trek pedigree.
I'm not sure there was, only because, let's see, when I arrived, they had only shot, excuse me, they shot 1 and 2. I think they had just shot The Ties That Bind when I arrived, which was, I think, 902, or maybe was that 903?
So Avalon 1 and 2, Origin, and is it The Ties That Bind out? It's pretty close.
4.
It's pretty early on.
It's 4. So was Woolsey already in the canon by episode 4? Because if so, then
he was introduced in Heroes. Season 7.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm certain that was somebody other than me. I don't think I knew the canon that well. I actually think there's here's a story that a little detail that I think might have got me the job between draft 1 and draft 2 is, after Rob had gone through all those errors that he wanted me to correct, I went into the second draft and I was working alone, and I kind of stumbled on something that I think we had collectively made an error. I was like, wait a second, if you send a MALP through to the other planet, it would also be redirected. So like, because and we had sort of glossed over that fact that we somehow realized the MALP was there, and then we were the ones who couldn't get through, and we had to solve that hurdle. And so I reached out to Rob and said, hey, listen, I don't know the canon as well as anybody else, but I think technically, wouldn't the MALP have also been redirected to another planet? And in that moment, I think I might have got the job, because I found a little, I clearly had gained enough of an understanding about the the canon to fix. So that's why we had to come up with that little thing where the MALP goes through with a piece of a bacterial culture or something.
Yeah. The Stargates are almost sentient to a degree, and you're anticipating that. Okay, well, if we're sending one type of information through, like a digital piece of information, the physical piece of information, there'd better be a story reason for why it will behave differently.
Exactly. Yeah. Because otherwise, I don't know how we would have ever figured out. I mean, which is why I guess clearly no one did for thousands of years. Therein lay the problem.
I would be concerned as a writer, and this is something that I watch that I look for, particularly when I'm watching science fiction, is that there are a number of incidents where I'm enjoying the show, but how we took to get to the meat of the story, that was really convoluted. Could they have simplified it at all? And so I'm sure part of you as a writer is, okay, where's the dance between making this interesting and going, oh, cool, and going, this is too much exposition. Yeah. We're burning precious seconds of production here, sending the characters, the actors, through hoops to say this dialogue just to convince the viewers, okay, that's what's happening, and now we can move on to Kalik.
I know. I mean, that was always the dance. The exposition dance was always very tough because the other good example of that we kept running into was on Atlantis. The distance between Earth and Atlantis was so great that they had to do the string
2
of
weeks.
Stargates.
Oh, the straight thing, right? The
you had to go through a Stargate and then go through
Midway
another
Station.
one, and so I forget which episode it was, but there was a concern about I can't remember what it was.
So there's an episode, if I may stop you, where they're having a live conversation between Atlantis and Earth, and they're looking over the fact that if you're sending a person or sending data, you have to go through the chain to do it. And instead, they've overlooked it for this scene. It's you can drive a semi through this plot hole, but you've got to do it for this episode.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you would have had to imagine that every single Stargate was activated simultaneously so that the radio signal could, But yes, I know. Stuff like that is. I admire movies that do that well, like The Martian, for instance, which I was watching not too long ago, and it's laden with sci-fi, technical, gobbledygook, but it's so intriguing because it's used in a way. I do think that the audience does like to feel smart. I like to write things that make the audience feel smart. It's kind of something I try to do in my writing, and I think I think it's I like to feel smart. I guess I am rewarded when I feel smart, so I like to gift that to the audience. But you're right, it is always a dance because too much it just gets unwieldy. It's we get it. Let's
One of Rick's and I really should memorize this quote because I do reference it from time to time, and it's utilized in 200. He's referencing that you need to accept that the audience, is fair. You have to rise to the audience's intelligence, and then and just don't take certain things for granted. They will get it if you don't overly explain it to them. You don't have to overly explain things to them. You just have to write better. And it's interesting because I always just assumed that was the case in the writer's room. That was basically at Stargate. That was just one of the goals. And then we had Joe Belazzi on a few weeks ago, and he revealed to me in part 15 of his interview, believe it or not, that one of his problems was he often assumed too much credit on behalf of the audience and was told, you do have to explain this a little bit more.
Right.
So that's a dance in and of itself.
For sure. Yeah. I remember on another show, I won't say which one, but I was being forced, it was a time travel episode where
here we go.
Back in time, and the risks to the present. Yeah, exactly. I know. Just don't even open that.
You have to be airtight on these, Alan.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing that I was getting network notes on was, well, you know, I was taking it for granted that the audience would understand if somebody bad went back in time and started messing with the timeline, that's bad. And then the network notes kept coming back and saying, well, why is that bad? Why is that bad? I'm like, because everything, I don't know, everything about the timeline that we know is changing. I mean, like, there's the risk that, and so I kept having to pad that exposition more and more and more because the note kept coming back and back and back. And eventually I got to like the third time when they said, well, just, can you please make it clear that somebody, going back in time and messing with the timeline is bad. And so I literally wrote, I wrote this big long paragraph, and then the character said, no, it's not rocket science. Only an idiot would not understand this, basically, and then sent that draft in. And finally the note went away, and then we didn't obviously shoot that version.
So that didn't make it to air. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh man, there is this is a quick aside. Whoever it was that wrote the novelization for Broken Bow for Star Trek Enterprise. Brandon Braga and Rick Berman went and read the novelization afterwards, and throughout the novelization, whoever wrote it did not like the show. Because throughout the novelization of this, they're referencing scenes that were shot. This world, this scene, this person is up on stage and doing something that in any other circumstance only an idiot would think to do. And it's like that she's literally taking shots at the writing from the show, and they're like, yeah, Paramount didn't have her back to write another one after that.
That was a one and done situation. Yeah.
Oh man. Network notes.
Network notes.
We haven't actually talked a great deal about this in the interviews on Dial the Gate. How was that done? Would they be individual episodes? Would they be blocks of them? And my understanding is that Brad and Rob normally did those, or I guess later at this point, Joe and Paul. Were you brought in? Where were you, at least earlier on, for network notes, and how would that come into play in terms of your relationship with the material in the script? I'm guessing you weren't in the meeting for those when those were coming in raw. They would massage them for you later.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, one thing I to give credit to Brad and Rob. I mean, the most valuable thing about a 4-year term on Stargate. And within the franchise, beyond just dealing with 40 episodes a year and reading and seeing 40 scripts a year evolve into production ready material, like that was an education in and of itself. But Rob and Brad were also very good about bringing us in on all of the, I went to the meeting, the production meeting, the prep meetings, the concept meeting, all the different department heads, learned how that worked.
You're in school.
We would watch mixes, the sound mixes in Rob or Brad's office, depending on whose episode it was. And in later years, Rob, or I guess Rob or Brad, depending on who it was, would send me over to do it, get a start on the editing. I mean, I remember which episode was it? I think it was Line in the Sand was sort of my first time in that. I'd gone and shadowed Rob prior to that to just see what he did in the edit suite, and he was always very gracious about that. Sure, tag along, you can do that. But Line in the Sand, the director's cut came in, and it was like 9.5 minutes overtime, and it was and Rob was just like, I can't even deal with this. Go see if you can cut 5 minutes out of it. So I went over solo and sat with the editor. I can't remember who it was, but he was a great editor. Mike.
Was it Brad Rhines?
Mike might have been Mike Banis. I can't remember. We'd have to check it out. But together we cut it. I think we eventually cut it down to be 5 minutes, just 5 minutes over. So we cut about 4.5 minutes out of it, and it went back to Rob, and he was very pleased. I think because his job got a heck of a lot easier when you're only having to cut 5 minutes versus when you have to cut 4.5 minutes. So yeah, that was later. You asked about network notes. I don't know if I was in there right from the beginning, but early on, I think fairly early on, I was brought in on network notes. I think a lot of it depends on, because I've since showrun shows, and you have to make a decision about whether to bring the writer in. I always try to, but if I get the heads up that the notes are going to be especially brutal or heavy-handed, then sometimes the network doesn't want the writer there because of that. Like that does
break your spirit.
Yeah, they're like, listen, we really didn't respond to this episode. We think it's better if maybe we just give the notes to you, to the showrunner, and then you can deal with the writer on your end, because they don't want to deal with it. I do think it's, I always tried to include the writer as much as possible, and if they're not there for the call, I would usually forward them a copy of the written notes, because oftentimes you get a call and then they follow it up with an email to clarify everything that they spoke about.
Eric Hill Eric Hill edited this one in particular.
Who did?
Eric Hill.
Eric Hill. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Now I remember. Yeah. Absolutely.
But I can't imagine what a gift that also had to have been. You're essentially being paid to go to school. Yeah. There are people who pay a lot of money in university to go through so many of the processes that you're going through, and you're getting to do it in a show that's in production, and you're getting real world experience in the process. That is so cool.
Oh, it was. I mean, you look at the staff of Stargate. I mean, it was a showrunner training program. I mean, it was a showrunner training program for Joe and Paul, who became showrunners on that show. Mm-hmm. It was a showrunner training program for Martin Giro, who went off to run shows. Carl Binder had been a showrunner already, but but it was a showrunner training program for me, Damian Kindler, Ken Kupris. Every single person who passed through that room went on to run their own shows, and I think in large part just because of how open and gracious they were about sharing their expertise.
No, for sure. There were a lot of moving elements to that as well. What is your favorite Stargate script?
Oh man, that's tough.
Right? No pressure, Alan.
Yeah. There were some great ones. And some were great in the script, and then the episode didn't quite rise to the script, and some were great episodes. Years ago, somebody asked me this question. It might have been on like one of the DVD extras, and I said Collateral Damage, which was Paul Mully's script. I don't remember it well enough to say absolutely that is the one, but I do remember that I just thought that script was really well written and a nice balance of character, and we learn about Mitchell, and
Ben's extraordinary in that episode.
Yeah, and some great effects, and a really, I don't know, I thought it was a nice balance of, I don't even remember the plot now that I'm thinking of it, but that one jumps out. I think there was also, Michael, the story of Michael Atlantis was so brilliantly written by Carl. Carl just has a beauty to his writing, an elegance to his writing that really, I loved reading his scripts.
So much about, I love Carl's characterization.
Yeah.
Of people. There is something very non-sci-fi about Carl's, it's almost, and this, I hope this is not an insult to Carl, but it almost felt like he was plucked from a very dramatic background and inserted into science fiction, and his spice to that set of ingredients was just amazing.
Yeah.
His stories were so human.
Yeah.
Before absolutely. I Sleep, I love Before I Sleep, the one where Weir goes through time. Right. And with Michael, I think that's an extraordinary example of, we could tell this straight from the Atlantis perspective.
Right.
What if we tell it from the bad guy's perspective?
Right.
And what does that say about us?
Right. I would say the retrovirus plotline, including Michael, the way that arced out was one of my fondest storylines. I just thought that the moral what's the word, quandary we're putting about, like, so you're saying if this works, we can just de-wraithify all the wraith and that's it, and we're done? Like, and then what do? You destroy a race to be able, anyway. Yeah.
What are they left with afterwards? What are they?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was. I did love that. I mean, and I loved the way that was written. And again, speaking of people, Connor Trenier did a fantastic job as Michael.
Yeah, I remember Brad talking about Connor was interested in the role, that someone had run it by him, and the word got back to Brad, and Brad, we were in the room with Brad, and he's telling the story, and he's like, book him. It's like, that's it, we got
Seriously, seriously done. I know.
Jeremy Heiner, the Deadalus Variations was one of my favorite Atlantis episodes.
Yes,
It is up there in the top 2 or 3 for me as well, in terms of the ones that you did. I love this episode. Jeremy wants to know, from your perspective, who were the mysterious aliens from the alternate reality? What inspired them? And would you have liked to have seen more of them had SGA continued into a season 6?
You know, I'm assuming you're talking about the big tall guys with the little, yeah.
Tell us about. Let's back up. Tell us about that episode.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, this is a testament to, I mean, this whole podcast has been a love letter to the guys that were working on the show. But this is a testament to people not giving up on a story. So I remember I pitched that story, and when I originally pitched it, I had pitched it as a room in Atlantis. They discover a room in Atlantis that then travels you through time, and of course, into alternate universes.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever it was, and then, but of course, the obvious problem then is, what if you transport into a dimension where Atlantis, or a universe where Atlantis doesn't exist? What if you transport? It didn't make sense. But everybody loved the idea that we had discovered an ancient device that could do this, and then. I think we broke for lunch and everybody was discouraged because they liked the idea. And then we come back from lunch and Rob Cooper's like, well, what if it's a ship? Because then, it immediately wipes out all of the inconsistencies of, well, wait, what square footage is it? Just up to the drywall of the room, or does the insulation go back in time, or just all that? So the idea of making it a ship came from Rob. And then we decided it should be the Deadalus, and then we decided that, it should be on this trajectory of passing. That may have been part of the original pitch, that it was going backwards in time, and then we had to reverse it. But yeah, like I said, it was a collective effort to figure out what that story actually was. Wow. Now, as for those aliens, I think I'll be honest, at the time, I think we were just looking for something spooky and cool, and James Robbins did a character design and said, what if they're like 6'9" guys like this, and it was like, yeah, and Ronan gets a big knockdown drag out fight with a guy as powerful as he is, and that was great. I don't think we spent a lot of time coming up with who or why those aliens existed, so I would just be inventing it now on the fly for Josh.
For kicks and giggles.
But I will say that we liked that character design a lot, and I think I can say that if we had done future seasons, I think there were plans to sort of revisit those aliens, because who knows, it was just a short, tiny part of that episode, so we didn't want to spend tons of money on giving them, certainly not like we didn't want to involve visual effects or anything like that. It was just, you wanted an impact through the costume and the character design. And then you wanted to move past it, but we loved it so much. We liked the way they looked and the way that we thought it would be nice to bring those guys back, and then we never got that chance. So. Yeah,
Malazzi released just a few weeks ago what he would have felt was his complete outline for season 6, and they do make a return.
So yeah,
they're not named, and I like that. They don't have to. Not. Have you read From a Buick 8, Stephen King?
No, I haven't actually. No.
From a Buick 8 posits the idea. The overall nugget of the idea is that there are things that we encounter in our world, in his world, supernatural things that are simply beyond our knowledge, and we have to deal with them. You get a little bit of backstory, a little bit, and then you've got this supernatural car that is a doorway to these things that keep on coming through, and you can't close that door. Right. I love the idea that this is not our Deadalus, this is another Deadalus, and it is on a journey that we know nothing about.
Right.
And we go aboard and we figure out, well, did McKay design this thing? Did he find out that, wasn't it him? Or it's definitely not an ancient piece of hardware that was plugged in.
Or maybe he had adapted, or they found the dead team. They get
on
sure
and
they find the dead team, and then he has to figure out how to send it backwards. I do think it was ancient design because I remember, I remember stupid things. I remember when we were trying to design the timer, the countdown timer, that it should look nothing like.
Okay.
It shouldn't look like a countdown.
Like
that. yeah. Well, they did a crazy thing with sort of concentric circles that kind of like were unwinding each other, and I mean it was great. It was an amazing. But yeah, I think we'd gone to Mark. What's his last name? Mark
Davidson? Savella.
No,
Mark Savella.
Mark Savella, and said, get your team to come up with something that just doesn't look, like what we would have, how we would do a countdown timer. And that's what they came up with, and I loved it. It was just anyway. Yeah.
There's something to be said for leaving the audience wanting more, and putting your characters in a situation where here we are. This is what we have to deal with to get out of it. We don't have time to explore the nature of what this is. We're just on this ride. That Deadalus was kind of an early Destiny.
Right. Yeah, that's true, actually. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. I mean, the concept of, I think at one point we were referring to that episode, the title was called The Flying Dutchman. I mean, it was like the concept of a ghost ship floating in the ocean is not new. We certainly didn't invent it, but and I know Brad had always been fascinated with that idea of a Flying Dutchman. So I'm maybe Deadalus plus Flying Dutchman turned into Destiny at somewhere along the way.
Where do you come down in terms of coming up with, okay, we're going to have time for about 3 or 4 stops in both directions. What kind of stops do we want to have? So we're going to have one where we're being attacked. Another one is, radiation. Where, do you, when you're in that group, is that where you come up with what should the stops be? Some of these need to be a little bit more visual effects conservative. How do you pull that off when you're bringing?
Well, the beauty, that was, again, that's the kind of thing we did in the writing room. I mean, generally speaking, when you come in with a pitch, and we used to joke about this. I'm sure others you've interviewed have joked about this over the years. We would bring in freelancers to pitch, and they would say, so, the team is off world and they're wrapping up a mission, and they come back into Atlantis, and, everybody's missing, or everybody is, the place has been destroyed. It's on fire and everybody's missing. And then we'd say, oh, great. That's fantastic. What happens next? And they're like, I don't know, like that. We got to figure that out. And it's like, so people would come in and pitch the tease, and it's, well, no disrespect, but anybody can come up with a great problem. What we're buying is the solutions. And so I think, a typical pitch would be, we Deadalus Variations. I'm not going to say I came up with this pitch going in, because I told you it was about a room, but we discover a ship in orbit. It's the Deadalus. We get on it. Suddenly the problem is we're skipping through universes, and we are encountering dangerous people and things on the way, and then we have to figure out our way back. And that's more of a typical pitch. And you don't have to have everything. You don't have to solve everything in that moment, but you do have to come in with something a little more, that I don't want to get off topic here, but I know Joseph talks about hamster ball as a pitch. That was a pitch of mine that, again, was like, that was a half-baked pitch. Anyway, they get caught in a hamster ball, and then what? And there's a good reason why that show was never made, because there was no and then what? And then what? Out.
I had the conversation with Rob about he would often think in terms of where ideas come from, and I'd love to have this conversation with you, but let me tee it up with Rob would think often in themes. I want to do a story about revenge. And then, Brad would often think up, based on what Rob has told me, Brad would often think up things in images. I've experienced, I have this idea for a scene. Now, why am I having that idea for? Why is that good? Where can we? So Brad, would probably be receptive to that kind of thing. Okay, but where's the story here? You have to have a reason for it.
Exactly.
Why haven't you come and brought that reason to us? We're sitting here now. We're wasting time. Why is this gate room burning?
Right.
So,
yes, exactly.
So where would your ideas come from? Do you think? Where do you pull from?
I began to look, and I honestly, I think reviewing all 8 seasons prior to when I started helped a lot, because I would start to look in the gaps. Like, and the best example of I can think of for this is, I always wondered why some wraiths have faces and speak and look insectoid, and some wraiths have that, the barnacle mask,
the carapace,
and the carapace. And I was like, well, why are they different? How did that happen? And that led me to, and because we had, I think it was season 10, we had been dealing a lot with cloning in that season. I thought, well, what if they're clones? What if the carapace ones are wraith clones, and they're born in they're born that way, and that's how they. And I can't remember the name of the episode, but we basically infiltrate a wraith breeding ground.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the episode too, because and we see them being born.
Yes, exactly.
And it's kind of it's pretty ghoulish.
It is. It's one of the more kind of like I'm not a big gore goop horror guy, but it is one of the more horrifying scenes we did. And they, of course, you give Todd Masters and free reign, and he goes hog wild, and it was, but it was great. I think the sound effect of the carapace being put on the baby wraith's head probably haunts my memories to this day. But that's generally what I would try to do. I would try to look at what we had done and find gaps. I can't explain it better than that. Or if I could come up with some other examples, I could. I might give you a better idea. But it's just like, even as early as my early days on Stargate, even the prototype, the call forwarding thing. I'm like, well, why wouldn't they do this? Or I think I did an episode early on where they stole a Stargate, and I'm like, why wouldn't they collect Stargates and make their own private little gate network? Like, it was
off the grid, yeah.
Yeah, off the grid, exactly. Yeah, which I think that episode has some challenges, but I love the idea that someone would go in and try to create their own little private gate network, especially now that SG-1 is around and screwing up your operations all over the galaxy. I could see why you might want to just have a little, virtual private network there.
One of the things, if I may, that always kind of, I think that Universe answered, but was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, for SG-1 and Atlantis, were the seed ships.
Right.
Because by the nature of these things, you're not going to plant a Stargate, open it up, bring pieces of another Stargate through, assemble it there, and then fly to another base, future base, and put them down. The Milky Way and Pegasus Galaxy likely had at least one seed ship with hyperspace capability, where these things were manufactured for their raw. Because if they were doing it back in version 1.0, they're doing something like that, similar or better for 2 and 3.
Right.
So where are these things now? Are they adrift? Were they destroyed? Are they floating around in an asteroid belt somewhere? And if perhaps hidden in an asteroid field, and were someone to come across one and start making Stargates again and planting them on worlds, you could have your own little fiefdom in your corner of the galaxy that no one would ever know about. You'd be in charge of assigning the gate, the addresses, and everything.
I remember we discussed, finding the Stargate factory, basically, and it might have that might have become off the grid, because we may not have wanted to deal with the Stargate factory of it all just yet. It was too big a thing, and we didn't know how to put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, that's one of the problems with introducing a bunch of ancient tech is you introduce something like, especially in the early days, the sarcophagus that just brings you back to life. It's like, well, that's kind of a problem. We have to figure out why the sarcophagi cannot be used on a regular basis, or we're done.
Yeah.
And that was well before my time, but
Of
obviously
course.
that's why they did the episode where it drives people crazy, because it's we can't have that. We can't have a life-saving device like that. And I think it was the same thing with the Stargate factory. We're like, that's just a little bit too big. If we discover a place where you could just build your own Stargate, how do we undo that? And that might have been, I don't remember exactly, but that might have been the pre-pitch for the
off the grid.
Off the grid.
Interesting. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And there were instances in the show, in the franchise itself, where there were problems that were introduced. For instance, one shot stuns, 2 shots kill, 3 shots disintegrate, that we just ignore. And others, like the Midway space station, this is too convenient now. Let's just blow it up.
Right.
And it'll be spectacular, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it falls back to what you're talking about exposition. There's and there is a danger of, we would call it hanging a lantern on it. Mm-hmm. There are things you do not want to hang a lantern on, and there are things that you must hang a lantern on, and then you have to just deal with it. But I think it's it's that dance. It's how do you make it entertaining but still credible within the world that you've created.
When you're introducing an element, you now have to face the fact that element has been incorporated into the lexicon. And, it better not knock down other dominoes unless it's for a really good story reason, and you're going to have to keep after all those pieces. It's like the time travel stuff. Joseph Malancy talked about the fact that when they were doing a time travel story, when you guys would do a time travel story, you would have to beat the hell out of it to make sure it was airtight. Because if it wasn't, you're asking the audience to go too far. It has to be, they have to be able to buy it. And at a certain point, you don't want them to go, I'm not going for it anymore. I don't believe what I'm seeing anymore. They've gone too far with it.
Because once you lose people, I mean, it's very hard to get them back. I remember it came up again with the Ancient Stones on Universe. Oh. Where, there was an issue where, the Ancient Stones allowed you to body swap with somebody on Earth. And then it was, I think I remember a fairly heated discussion. I may have been, too much the logic police on this one. But I was like, well, what, if somebody, you can't allow that person to leave the base unescorted. I mean, I think it was an episode where, they swapped and then we followed and people went out to visit their families. I think it was early on in Universe.
Yeah,
they went out to visit their families. And I was like, well, they wouldn't just let them willy-nilly head out. I mean, if a car runs those people down here, what happens to,
Yeah, and you guys eventually answer that.
You're left with, a no-name person on the Destiny who has no idea what to do. You can't have, a Rush or his consciousness. You can't lose that on the Destiny.
Yeah, no, if one person dies at one end, the other person dies at the other. And eventually, the amazing story that was introduced in season 2 was that consciousness is still floating free and can be re-secured, in Destiny's computer. Yeah, on the other end, the one who
was gone by then. I was moved up to Sanctuary by then.
Yeah, absolutely. My issue with season 1 and the stones, we could talk an hour about the stones and the logic behind them and everything. Was when the show was airing, Darren and I had a weekly podcast, and we were like, at some point they're going to have to hang a lantern on it, so to speak, that these people are walking out of the base, going to their spouses in another body and having sex.
Yes.
Like where is, you have to, the host has to have signed off on that.
Right.
Yes, you may use my body for this. And in one of the episodes, we find out that hyperspace transition pauses the connection, and right in that moment, Lou Diamond Phillips is, well, I know what's going on here. All right. Yeah. Have fun. And then gets snapped back. Were those conversations that were because it's never, We just assume that those things were done, and it was never actually expressed verbally by the characters. Were those the kinds of conversations that you guys were having in the writers' room?
Absolutely, nonstop. It's the kind of thing that and that's the thing when you introduce. This was the risk of introducing new and powerful alien technology, as you had
and possibly STDs.
Yeah, you have to figure out all the permutations, of how those things could go wrong, because all it takes is we don't do that work and we put the episode on the air, and then some enterprising fan out there says, "Wait a minute, couldn't you just do this?" And then we're like, it happened more than once with Teyla and her ability to detect Wraith. I mean, that was a big part of the early part of Atlantis. And then in later years, we're in a hive ship that we think is abandoned, and lo and behold, it isn't. There's a bunch of Wraith. Well, why didn't Teyla sense those? Anyway, yeah, they're like all. There are. Yeah, but most of the time we talked it out as best we could, and then had to make sometimes arbitrary choices to say, okay, well, look, if hyperspace clicks in, then sometimes it was done to make that as a plot complication, and sometimes it was done because like blowing up Midway. Look, this is just getting too convenient.
This is getting crazy.
The beaming technology. I mean, Joe, I'm sure, has railed about the beaming technology. It became a crutch, but it also we had never dealt with it. We couldn't pretend that beaming technology didn't exist, and so we gave them hand transmitters. And when those got stolen, well, I don't know why you wouldn't put a subcutaneous transmitter in then, because. Right. We can do that. They can do that. So you have to play out the logic of what they would do, but hope it doesn't get in the way of the story and all future stories where just they can beam out anytime you want.
And as fans, we do appreciate when your attention to detail goes that far, where we go. Destiny's batteries are old. They're shot. They have like 2 or 1% of their overall charging capacity remains.
Right.
They're toast, having been floating out there for millions of years without a break. But hey, we now know how they recharge. They recharge inside a star. Can we not dial back to Earth while they're in a star? And lo and behold, 2 or 3 episodes later, they're trying it. And
right.
What are the gravitational implications for this, and time implications for this? Trying to do this while inside this massive spatial, this massive force of nature in the universe,
Right.
And you guys, the effort was right. The effort was not wasted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that definitely, and I know Universe less. I didn't. Full disclosure, I was part of the sort of the original development of Universe, but then eventually I was moved on to another show. So I did write 1 episode in season 1, but I didn't. I can't take any credit for that. Sounds really cool. What you just described, but I know nothing about it.
Okay, understood. Yeah, no, it is in many respects my favorite of the shows, largely because so much of what you guys had evolved came to fruition there and flowered. Not to say that it hadn't before, but it really flowered in Universe. The intensity of those characters, to this day, is a subject of debate. They're too real. They're too much like real life, Right. And I still contend that the show was so well ahead of its time, because so many of the folks who didn't give it a fair shake then have given it one now, and they're like, oh, and we're like, yeah, welcome aboard.
I think it came. I mean, it might have been. Was it Battlestar Galactica had risen to such prominence, and so everybody thought that this is what sci-fi had to be, and we were tinkering with obviously still a story of the week type thing, and a good a self-contained sci-fi story, but put people in a position where there are serialized elements as well, and the characters, and a wider variety of people. It wasn't just the best and the brightest scientists and soldiers. It was
that's right.
The diplomat's daughter, and then people that didn't belong there just ended up there.
Yeah.
I thought that was the real brilliance of it, because it for years Carl was pitching the I forget what the name, the Red Shirt Diaries or something, where basically, it was an episode where we didn't focus on the leads, we focused on the because someone up there on Atlantis is mopping the floors, and so that
lower decks.
Yeah. I began to watch earlier this year For All Mankind, and there's a bit of that in the
I haven't seen it yet. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. They get into that a little bit where there's they need the grunts to go up there and do the mining, and it becomes a bit of an issue where this is what I left Earth for anyway.
Yeah. Someone has to be Roger Wilco in Space Quest.
That's right. That's
Hunda Tuum. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah, okay. I'm okay.
Hunda Tuum. Do you sometimes use fresh real-life experiences to give birth to ideas to place in your scripts? Like having a very bad mood and becoming impatient before Mitchell storming off in Stronghold? Like, what a I'll pay for that. Jeez.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. I guess we certainly do. I mean, you use it's more stories and situations that you use. I think that your day-to-day mood. I'm in a bad mood every time I have to write. So I don't think
right. You mean you're saying it's not a joyful transcendent process for you?
Finishing a script is the best feeling in the world. Writing it is a maddening. Yeah, it's a fool's enterprise. But I think I have certainly used turns of phrase and situations and things. When you need a character to get irritated, the cliche is, oh, they stubbed their toe, but you want to dig deeper than that. You want to find something in your life that really, really irritated you, and then you put it in the script. Sometimes it survives, sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, Rob and Brad or Joe and Paul or whoever was producing that episode the showrunner might do a showrunner pass that wipes out what you wrote and put something else there or eliminates entirely. But yeah, no, it's a great. I mean, that is I think what separates good writing from writing that is I don't know, just boring or cliche. Seeing real moments and people's real lived experience on screen, I think, is what makes it attractive.
You talked about Brad and Rob doing passes on episodes. Were you ever really enamored with a line that you had written or something that you had constructed and were just in pieces when it got pulled? Yeah. It happened for sure. I mean, the main thing is when you join a staff, it is your job. You're not there to serve your vision. You're there to serve the showrunner vision, where they are. And so it's par for the course. You have to have a thick skin. You have to. And so I think I was less downcast to see things that I loved being pulled, and more concerned that too many things were being pulled, and I had somehow failed to live up to the task of delivering an episode. Obviously, it takes time. I mean, in the early years, a lot of my scripts were, bulldozed by the showrunner. He just the 20% of what you wrote ends up on the screen. In later years, obviously that's 90, sometimes 100. Sometimes my scripts would go through untouched, but in each case, you're always trying to do your best to make less work for the showrunner, because writing is unpleasant, the last thing you want to do is get handed a draft that you have to destroy your weekend and go home and do a giant page one rewrite on it. It's not pleasant, and nobody wants, as a writer, you don't want to impose that on anyone else. I would certainly feel like if 20% of my script was surviving, that the thought would cross my mind at least, okay, I am causing more time to be spent because of my inadequacies on this, where some other capable writer would have saved Brad and Rob so much more time and would have retained a higher percentage. Yeah. What am I doing
You're wondering, you're assuming if it happens consistently, you're assuming you better start looking for another job.
Right, exactly.
But nobody has time for that. They just don't.
But when you get to 90%, 100% at the end of the day, at the end of the project is being retained, that has to be rewarding in and of itself, because it's like the filtering that they put me through, the wood chipper that they put me through, really did carve out a better script writer.
Absolutely. And I would say that that's true of, there were some things that, sure, there were some things that were lost that I liked. I had written a piece in 200, the Teal'c as Shaft. Yes, I wrote that little section or whatever that act.
Teal'c PI.
Yeah, and I think there were things in it that were I think that were funnier, but maybe less producible in it. Like I can't remember specifically. I don't remember what survived and what didn't, but I think I had him in a hot tub, and I had all these but it drives up the cost, and it's a lot. It's more shooting, it's more this, and you always have to keep in mind, again, when you're a baby writer, as we refer to them, you can't, you have to make your episodes producible within the confines of the show, and everything costs money. Visual effects cost money. A $5,000 hot tub rental, or whatever, you costs money. And plus you have the time spent and makeup, and if you think of tiny little things, they cost you time. And so you add in one tiny thing like that, and you lose the whole day doing for some silly gag that I might miss it, but the audience won't, because they didn't know it existed.
Yeah, so I remember talking with Rob for an episode that's not released yet. It's going to be released next month when I'm taking my vacation. I said there's a shot in his first episode that he wrote and directed, which was Crusade. And it's an aside. Vala says, so we got married, and it's 2 seconds on screen of this entire courtyard on the effects stage of the outdoor village set of the wedding party, and it's like, that was an expensive shot.
Yeah,
it had to have been for the amount of time that it appears on screen. So, and I would think as a writer, on a show as high budget and effects as this, the phrase "that's too expensive, let's massage that," or "let's think of something different," "that's too expensive" would come up fairly regularly in the development process.
All the time. I can think of two examples. In the Kindred Part 1 and Part 2, we brought back Carson Beckett for one shot at the end of Kindred Part 1, and you pay actors episodically. I'm assuming, I don't know what his deal was, but whatever your episodic rate is, it doesn't matter if you're in there for 1 second or the whole episode.
He gets paid the rate.
That's your rate. But you in the end, and we went back and forth over whether or not, okay, if we're going to bring back Paul McGillian for this 1 second shot at the end of the episode, do we have to use him more? And ultimately, the decision was, look, the reveal is it's the whole thing. It's the reveal. We got to bite the bullet and pay for it.
It's an emotional investment too. Oh man, it was that was worth every cent as an audience member.
Exactly. And it was part of the two-parter. It was like, was it part of the two-parter? Or was it just,
yeah, end of Kindred 1,
the end of season 1, yeah. So
Kindred Part 1, yeah.
So we were, we bit the bullet and did it then. And by contrast, a show like the Deadalus Variations, a big part of the reason I remember I was sitting in the prep meeting with Paul planning the episode, and it's like, okay, well, we've got low cast numbers on this episode. Every show has a pattern budget, right? They a certain amount of cast days per episode, a certain amount for visual effects, a certain amount for locations, etc. All those amounts.
And isn't it like just a few $1,000s in the scheme of things? That's left over for each episode.
It's
not a ton.
We constantly go over budget, constantly to try to fit it all in. The Deadalus Variations was unique in that there isn't a lot of cast. There's the four, the lead team, and then there's the aliens, and then there, I don't know, there's some other people at the beginning.
A double shepherd. He doesn't get paid
a
twice.
double shepherd, exactly. But and there are not a lot of locations because it was our home sets.
Yeah.
And so by consequence, we could take the visual effects budget on that show and blow it out of the water. And which is how we got. I'm trying to remember, is that the episode?
That's the dog fight.
Yeah, and the dart goes like around and underneath the Deadalus.
With the alien, that was the alien ships. That was so cool.
Yeah. And so we went hog wild. I think we spent $500,000 on effects, visual effects, on that episode, which is not sustainable on an ordinary episode. But in that particular episode, because everything else had been reduced, we could go a little hog wild on the visual effects.
When you look at an episode like Kindred 1, that saves the reveal for Carson at the end, and then by the way, Sci-Fi Channel in their commercial. Well, I guess that's spoiled.
Yeah.
How often would that come up in
You're not going
discussions?
to stay tuned for the last 5 seconds, and then
let's just show it to you now. Why not?
Yeah, I know.
Now with the Monday morning, like coming in to the office, did you see the tag for next week's episode? How would that make you guys feel?
It drove us crazy. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard the famous story.
The bomb is the building.
What's that?
The bomb is the building. The bomb's not in the building.
That
was the big one.
The Antarctica one with Brad, where they found the second gate in Antarctica in the earlier season, in whatever season that was.
Yeah, the Solitudes. I haven't heard this story.
The TV log line, the TV guide log line said, like, that describes the episode in 10 words, or in the TV guide said, Stargate SG-1 finds another gate in Antarctica. That's literally what it said, and it's just like.
I didn't know this.
I mean, you should ask Brad that.
I will.
That. Yeah. and so that came up again, obviously, when the Kindred promo came out from Sci-Fi. You won't believe the last 5 seconds. Well, I guess I do now. I will now.
The season 9, the big one was Sam on the phone when Ball has planted a Naquita enriched building, and it said the bomb isn't in the building. The bomb is the building, and they're like, that's the punch for the entire episode. So
that's the Act 4.
Good one, Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, I was so surprised that you guys didn't have more opportunity to not control it, but at least send a memo, of things to avoid in this.
Yeah.
And something very similar for the Lost Tribe. Sci-Fi Channel released early in the week the shot of the Asgard coming out of the back of the soldier. And it was like, okay, I see they're trying to drum up, interest for that episode, but there goes that reveal to anyone who's logging into sci-fi.com, and they did big advertisements for it. Whatever, man. I
mean, so much of it is beyond your control. I didn't have a lot to do. I didn't have much interaction with the network back then. I certainly did more on subsequent shows. And to their credit, they're doing their best, and they're trying to promote. Especially nowadays, they're trying to promote a show in a landscape with 500 other shows, and they're trying to pick anything that will make it stand out, anything that will drive 1 or 1,000 extra viewers their way, and they do their best. But we did. On the last show I did, we certainly said, please don't reveal this or this. Because it's part of an arc, right? I mean, it's like you're setting something up and you're paying it off later. So when you're cutting the promo this week, please don't say anything about this, because we don't want to do that. We don't want to spoil it. But
for sure.
But yeah, you don't have a lot of control. They are going to do what they're going to do. Network's going to network, I guess.
The network's going to network. That's it. Alan, this has meant so much to me to have you on. I got to ask before I let you go, what does this franchise mean to you, your body of work? What kind of place does it hold in your heart? With not only the work that you did, but the relationships that you forged in that show.
I mean, it's the I don't know where to start. I don't want to make this a long-winded answer, but yeah,
sappy. Please make it sappy as possible.
Yes, absolutely. To cue the violin music. No, I like I said, I joined Stargate as I had written one freelance episode of an animated show, and I had done one season of a kids show. So to be brought on to not only a 1 hour show, I'd never written a 1 hour script before, other than a Law and Order sample, which got me the job. But
oh wow, okay.
It was to be brought onto a show like that. Not only that, but the biggest show in Canada at the time, a show that was making 40 episodes a year across 2 shows. The training that I got out of that, I mean, it transformed my writing, and the ability to have another crack at it. You know, like okay, that one didn't go so well, but I've got another one coming down the. You know, like those early seasons, I think I was writing 4 or 5 episodes a season. You know, and to not have to say, you know, it would be like being a member of a hockey team and you get one shift, and if you don't score, or if you screw up, that's it, you're out. You know, like on a lot of shows, that's the way it is. You know, especially now in our constricted episode orders, there's 6 or 8 or 10 episodes. You get like 1 episode a season, and if it's not good, well, you're not coming back next year. Whereas in a show with 20 episodes or 40 episodes, as the case may be, you might get multiple opportunities. If you screw up all 5, sure.
That's sure. But I mean, in 40 episodes of work, you're responsible for pulling 1/8 of that. You know, if you're doing 5 shows for a new writer, that's a big deal. And for now, you know, in a lot of these same kinds of shows, or 8 to 10 episodes in a season, it's unheard of.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. You wouldn't, you know, as the showrunner, you might get the premiere and the finale, you know, and a longer, an 18 or 16 episode order, you might get a third one in the middle. But no, it's unusual, especially for somebody starting out, unheard of for somebody starting out to get that many episodes, that many cracks at it. So not only was it a great training ground, it also was just a beloved, I love the lore. I love the style, the what's the word? Style's the wrong word. I love the
whimsy.
Yeah, the whimsy. I love that. That's become a big part of what I do. This sort of lightheartedness, you know, the quippy dialogue, and then, you know, fun banter between characters. The episode itself is grounded, and the stakes are high, but the characters take things with a grain of salt, and there's a light touch to it. It's also the show on my resume that everyone's heard of. There's you know, a lot of the other shows I've written for, you know, people ask me what I do for a living when I encounter them, you know, the doctor's office or something, and I list off 5 shows, and it's a blank stare up until I say, well, I also wrote for Stargate, and they're like, oh, Stargate, I like that show. So yeah, there was it's one of the few episodes on my resume that people have actually heard of.
And after 15 seasons, 15 years of being away, or 13, 14 at this point, I think that says something about its place in our culture. It doesn't have to be the level of Star Wars or Trek, but people know what it is, and to have left an imprint on society like that, and to have been a part of that, that's got to be really cool.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I am blessed to have been a part of that group, and you talked about the friendships too. Like, I stay in touch with virtually all of the people that I work with, you know, on the writing staff at least. You know, I've lost touch a little bit with Paul and with Martin, but you know, the other guys I could call at a moment's notice, and likewise, I think, you know, and that is not true of every show I've worked on. I would not be able to do that on other shows, you know, that some of which were multiple seasons, but I just don't have the same relationship with people. So
that says something about the quality of what you guys did, and I think it resonates all the way through down to us as the fans as to why we resonated with it as well. I think it's all of a piece in terms of the energy that the product is putting out, and the energy through which we receive it.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Alan, please come back. I want to talk more about specific shows.
For sure, yeah. I'll do a little more studying next time.
I'll give you a list. Don't you worry.
Yeah, okay.
So, but yeah, we this season is going to be going through October. So.
Oh, great.
Stargate's 30th anniversary this fall.
I'm impressed. You said 268 or 86 or something?
I'm somewhere around there, man. Yeah, I've been burning the midnight oil.
Hats off.
Thank you.
Congratulations
Something's
on
working. I appreciate it, but it's meant a lot to me to have you, and it's an oversight that it's taken this long. But I'm glad you're a part of the show.
Thank you, man. Anytime, reach out again. We'll do it again sometime.
I will do that. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up on this end.
Okay. Cheers.
Thanks, Alan. Alan McCullough, writer and producer for Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. What a cool guy. I've always liked him. This has been a great opportunity to look at another aspect of so many of the favorite shows that we have enjoyed over the seasons, and I really appreciate you all tuning in to help us express our love for the show through your questions and everything else. My moderating team, you guys have kicked ass this weekend. 5 shows. Gosh, I'm sorry, but I do appreciate it. Tracy, Anthony, Jeremy, Marcia, Summer. Guys, keep it up. I don't know where you get the energy. I certainly couldn't pull it off. Big thanks to Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web, who keeps dialthegate.com up and running. Over there, you will see that Tony Amendola is joining us tomorrow. He's going to be talking about his new project, Exit Shakespeare, and also be telling us more stories about Master Braytak. And again, as we mentioned earlier, Wednesday, July 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, Neil Jackson, who played Kalik in SG-1 and the Punk Wraith in Atlantis. He's going to be joining us live as well, so bring your questions for him. But dialthegate.com is where all the information is about the upcoming shows. I think that's all that we have for you here. We're going to be I'm taking a break in July, but you're going to have some pre-recorded episodes throughout, so keep an eye on that, and everything else that's going to be heading your way this summer, including our San Diego Comic-Con show, which will be posted a week later. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. I appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you on the other side.